He treated his daughters like servants, but gave everything to his useless son. This was the woman's fifth childbirth, but this time the pain was worse than the previous four combined, feeling like she was risking her life. Outside, for little girls huddled in the doorway, their small hands clenched tightly, hearing their mother's cries from inside. They were all pale with fright, too afraid to even utter a sound. The midwife, sweating profusely, shouted at the woman to push, muttering, "If it's a boy, you won't have to suffer like this anymore." All four daughters longed for a younger brother. The oldest was 12, the youngest only 3. With a brother, their grandparents wouldn't scold their mother for being useless. Their father wouldn't constantly give them attitude, and they wouldn't be called money-losing goods by the villagers, unable to hold their heads high wherever they went. Not long after, a loud cry came from inside. The midwife lifted the curtain and shouted, "It's a boy! A boy!" Upon hearing this, the father rushed into the house like a madman. Without even looking, he spotted the dying woman, snatched her away, and held the baby boy, crying and laughing. He kept shouting, "My family has an heir. I have a lineage." From that day on, everything in the house revolved around the younger brother. The best food and things to use all went to him. The four older sisters could only get what was left over, and even looking at him would get them scolded by their father. The father named the younger brother Xiaobao, little treasure, and treated him like his lifeblood. The eldest daughter had just turned 12 when the father stopped letting her go to school, forcing her to stay home every day to take care of her brother, do laundry, cook, feed the pigs, and farm, leaving her no free time. All the eggs, flour, and stews in the house were served to the younger brother, while the older sisters could only drink porridge and coarse grains. And Dee could only secretly swallow their saliva as they looked at the food in their brother's bowl. The younger brother was spoiled rotten from a young age and would be beaten and scolded for the slightest thing. If any of the older sisters dared to resist, the father would raise his hand to hit them, cursing, "You worthless wretches! How dare you bully my son? I'll beat you to death." Within 2 years, the family's finances became increasingly strained, while the younger brother's spending habits grew exponentially. He wanted snacks and toys, and his father always gave in. Danny, desperate, secretly went to work in another city with other villagers. At only 16, he found work in a small factory, toiling for over 10 hours a day until his back ached. He dared not spend a penny recklessly, sending everything except for food money home, hoping to improve his mother's and sister's lives. Whenever Danny sent money home, his father immediately used it to buy his brother new clothes and toys, and even sent him to school in town, completely disregarding the fact that the women in the family were still wearing patched clothes. Ernie and Sonny, also of school age, had never even set foot in a school. When Danny returned home for the new year, he bought his mother a thick cotton-padded coat. Before she could even wear it, his father snatched it away, saying that Xiaobao would be cold at school and that it was for him. Danny argued with his father, who shoved him to the ground, scolding him for being insensitive and not caring about his brother. When Ernie reached marriageable age, No one came to propose marriage. The South offered a dowry, but her father, without a word, kept it all and bought his younger brother a new bicycle. Ernie cried and begged her father to keep some for her dowry, but he pointed at her and scolded. I raised you all these years. What's wrong with taking a little dowry? Your brother will need money to get married later. How dare you disobey me? After her brother started school, he didn't study properly, skipping classes and fighting every day. He was expelled from school, but her father not only didn't scold him, but also begged everyone to send him back to school, spending all the family's savings and even forcing Danny to send more money. Danny's factory wasn't doing well, and he couldn't even pay wages. Unable to come up with the money, her father called him every day, scolding him for being unfilial and saying he had raised him for nothing. Her brother idled away his time at home, hanging out with the village hooligans, spending money recklessly, making life miserable for his four older sisters. Danny fell ill from overwork at the factory but refused to spend money on medical treatment, stubbornly continuing to work. Ernie suffered mistreatment at her in-laws' house after marriage because her family took all her dowry without compensation. Her mother-in-law constantly gave her the cold shoulder. Sonny and Sini went out to work at a young age, but their earnings were all taken by their father and spent on their younger brother. A few years later, the younger brother said he wanted to start a business in the city, demanding 20,000 yuan in capital. Their father took out all the family's savings and forced his four daughters to contribute. Danny received an advance on her wages. Ernie borrowed money from her in-laws, and Sonny and Sini pooled all their hard-earned savings. Finally, they managed to scrape together 20,000 yuan, but the younger brother took the money and left without looking back. They thought he would make money, but 6 months later, he returned dejected, having lost all his money and owing over 10,000 yuan in debt. Creditors came knocking on the door every day, demanding money. The father was so frightened that he hid at home, afraid to go out. The younger brother had vanished without a trace. The creditors cursed and threatened to take everything if the money wasn't paid. The woman, seeing the house in such disarray, fell seriously ill, lying in bed, feverish and delirious. The father, however, was only concerned with collecting debts. Ignoring his wife's fate, Danny rushed home. Seeing his ailing mother and his debt-collecting father, he felt both pain and anger. He borrowed money everywhere, first paying off the creditors, then borrowing money for his mother's medical treatment, and staying by her bedside day and night. Ernie also rushed back from her husband's home, tending to her needs. Sonny and Sini stayed home to farm and cook. With the four daughters working together, they finally weathered the storm. But the father showed no remorse, still lamenting his son's hardships and asking his daughters to help their brother. The younger brother, having racked up even more debt, was chased by creditors and with nowhere to turn, ran home. Upon entering, he immediately launched into a tantrum at his four older sisters, accusing them of being incompetent and saying their father was biased. He even pushed and shoved his mother, cursing her for being useless. Seeing his son's outburst, the father, instead of scolding him, even tried to get more money from his daughters. But this time, all four daughters were heartbroken. The eldest daughter stood up and declared, "We'll never give you money again. You caused this mess. You have to bear the consequences. If you help her again, we'll never come home again." The father, never expecting his usually obedient daughters to rebel, froze, speechless at their resolute gazes. The woman's illness worsened, and on her deathbed, she held her four daughters' hands, weeping and apologizing for not giving them a good life and for causing them so much suffering. Then she breathed her last. After her burial, the father remained sullen, while the younger brother continued his reckless ways, going out to fool around and never returning home. The house was empty except for Dad, cold and desolate. He was old and couldn't do heavy work. He also suffered from rheumatism, making it difficult for him to walk, eat, and dress. He thought of his son, but his son hadn't even called, let alone come to see him. He sat alone at the door, watching other people's children being filial, and thinking of all the bad things he had done to his daughters in the past. The more he thought about it, the more regretful he became, spending his days in tears. His health deteriorated, and he fell ill and was bedridden with no one to care for him. When his four daughters learned of his illness, although they still harbored resentment, blood was thicker than water. The eldest daughter quit her job to stay home and care for him. The second, third, and fourth daughters took turns coming back to cook, do laundry, get his medicine, and serve him tea and water, caring for him more attentively than if he were a bride. Watching his daughters busy themselves, Dad remembered how he had treated them like a burden, beating and exploiting them, giving all his love to his unfilial son. Now, old and immobile, he was being cared for by the daughters he had once despised. He felt incredibly guilty. Holding Denise's hand, she cried, saying she had been foolish and made terrible mistakes before. After her father recovered from his illness, he completely changed. He never mentioned his unfilial son again and praised his four daughters to everyone he met for their filial piety. He did all the farm work and housework himself, not letting his daughters suffer. He even divided the family's only piece of land into four parts, saying he would leave it to his four daughters. The villagers all said he had finally figured things out and knew that his daughters were the most caring people. Later, her younger brother continued to wander outside and never came back to see his father. During holidays, the four daughters would bring their husbands and children back to their parents' home, making the house lively and bustling. Seeing his large family smiling from ear to ear, her father truly understood that a family's happiness never depended on sons carrying on the family line. It was the daughter's thoughtfulness and filial piety and the family's unity that brought the most solid happiness. Don't always think that sons are the ones who carry on the family line. Preferring sons to daughters is the most hurtful thing. Sincere devotion knows no gender. Filial and sensible children are the most precious blessing in a family. Favoritism and pampering will only lead to emptiness in the end.